Why don't we? Sorry, did I? No, that's all right. That's what I was going to ask for. All right, so I'm just going to jump into the service then for today. And my title today is Matching and Blessing, because I think it's very topical considering the news over the past week or so. I think most people have heard, and actually I was going to put it in the announcement email that went out this morning, but as I was trying to put it in, certain kids kept waking up. So I ended up going to sleep. But yeah, as people are aware, Brendan got blessed last weekend. I think people saw some of the photos. I might try to send it out this afternoon or evening to a Russian sister named Valeria. So congrats to the McManus family. And of course, I think everyone's looking forward to meeting her. I think he's in Russia right now. So I think they let him in. Even though, yeah, will they let him out? That's the question. Especially, I think Ireland is on Putin's bad country list or whatever he wrote up for his government.
Conor McGregor was fighting a Russian guy. Putin met the Russian guy that Conor McGregor was fighting. Conor insulted the Russian guy there.
Oh, wow. Jeez. Yeah. So, but the other good news I think most people saw was Tara Judith was also matched on the same day. They had a kind of matching commitment ceremony, and with Michael Klinger. So I think people have met with Klinger. They've come here a few times. Actually, I haven't seen Michael since he was probably around 12 or 13. He's much taller now based on the pictures. So they both look really happy, and some of their photos are kind of, they're really smiling, really laughing. So it's good to see. And of course, I think what's interesting is both those events obviously aligned with the True Mother for the first time combining 3 holy days. Well, actually 2 holy days and an anniversary, if we're being or technically correct. But it was, we had the holy table, and I talked a bit about this, but I wanted to include in the service as well, because basically Mother took the anniversary of her getting blessed to True Father, and the marriage of the Lamb, the holy wedding, and God's Day, or now Heavenly Parents' Day, and Parents' Day, not True Parents' Day, and combine it into kind of a single event and have the blessing on that day. And that's probably not going to happen every time, because usually the blessing has to be on a weekend for practical reasons. But that holy day, because it's the lunar calendar, and because anyway it wasn't the lunar calendar, it's not always going to be on a Saturday or Sunday. So we had, for last weekend, we had a really kind of stars aligned. First time 2 parents have put all 3 holy days together. And what I was saying at the holy day service was that makes a lot of sense, because all of those holy days are really about what I termed before kind of the core of our faith and the core of our belief system, which is parentism or parentalism. I'm not sure which one is the best, but they're all very parent-centric holy days. And one thing that was interesting, because I guess I haven't done my holy day research enough in the past, is that Parents' Day was established because of True Parents' anniversary, wedding. And it was established on the first year of their anniversary, the first anniversary year of the wedding. It was like retroactively established to be the same day as their blessing, as their holy marriage. So, so Parents' Day and the anniversary of True Parents' holy wedding were always completely connected, intrinsically connected. And so then adding God's Day as part of that is kind of saying that, well, if you're going to celebrate parents, you should also celebrate God as a parent. That's kind of how I interpret it. Right? So the whole thing is parents are the core of the universe, right? And there's that famous line in True Father's speech when he's in the peace messages, where he says very specifically, what is the meaning of the universe? What is the center of the universe? And it's the parent-child relationship. So that's what's also interesting, though, is last weekend, Easter, the three Abrahamic faiths had a kind of combined holy day as well, right? So you had kind of Easter, Ramadan. I missed which of the Jewish days it was, but they were kind of all on the same day, I think on the Sunday. So, maybe if we look back at this year and this time, as with many kind of historical events, we don't quite realize while they're happening, but it's kind of a very interesting kind of providential collection of things happening, right? So, so hopefully that means Brendan's blessing, Tara's matchings are extra blessed, but also just very happy for them, right? It's very happy to see them kind of moving into that stage, right? So, that's why I figured I feel it's important to kind of talk about the matching blessing as much as we can, as often as possible, because the blessing, like in true parents' holy wedding, is the establishment of the parental role, right? And even though when you first get blessed, you don't instantly become a parent. It's kind of the first step in that direction, right? And true parents kind of became true parents through the holy wedding, right? Through the holy wedding, and then through the process of becoming a couple and then becoming parents. And also the thing about the blessing is, in our kind of life of faith, in our religious belief, the blessing is the only real test of faith, the only real commitment that we have. We don't have a communion, we don't have a bar mitzvah, right? All the Sunday services, all the workshops, all the Sunday school that we do is all around actually the importance of the blessing. It's preparation for the blessing, and then it's even once we're blessed, although maybe that's an area we need to be stronger in, even once we're blessed, it's kind of helping to establish blessed families and blessed couples, right? If you think about it, it's even the source of our prayer. When we conclude our prayer, right? True parents gave us the authority to pray based on the blessing, right? As a blessed central couple, I report this. So the blessing is the core of our faith. But the other thing, as I said, is it's a test of faith. And what do I mean by that? And the reason I say it's a test of faith is because, there comes a point when you have to really decide. Every person has a personal responsibility. Every person has a personal relationship with people around them, but also with God and with their own beliefs, right? And the decision to get matched and blessed is really a test of faith, because the question is, if you really believe these things, right? If you believe in the principle, if you believe that God is your parent, if you believe in spirit world, then they will be involved in your matching process. They will be involved in your blessing process. And it's an important point, because even though we're responsible for our own kind of matching and blessing, we're not in full control. And that's where the kind of part of faith comes in. That our faith is, we have to trust that God really does care, very personally about it, because it's one of the most important decisions and steps in our life, is who we will marry, who we will create a family, right? So when I say a test of faith, we have to understand why we're getting matched, right? We have to believe why we're getting matched. We have to believe why we're getting blessed. So it's that element, I think, that's very different from how other people look to get married, right? How other people look to establish kind of their own families, is you do have to give up a little bit of this element of control. And it's a very important point. It's a very strong step of faith. Now, just because we're not in control doesn't mean we're not responsible in terms of matching and blessing. And of course, we're responsible. Of course, we have to make the decision, make the conditions, right? The principle is very clear that we have to, establish the right conditions, establish the right heart, take the right steps, make an environment so spirit world can work, have the right attitude. But we're also trusted that God and spirit world are involved in that process, that they're guiding that process, that they're supporting that process. Also, though, I think it's important that we know that it can be difficult. And why is it difficult? Why does the matching and blessing have to be difficult? And I think the answer to that, at least the answer I've come to, is that, well, it's difficult for everybody, right? This is actually the reality of the world, that relationships, because we're all in our own, let's say, we're all off-center, right? We all have something in our lives that have moved us away from the center of God's heart and the center of God's love that we're trying to get back to. So we all have in our own hearts things that are blocking us, right? That we have to kind of struggle through and learn from. And I think this is just true for everyone. So I think the reason that matching and blessing is so hard is because actually dating is so hard, because marriage is hard, right? That establishing this kind of intimate relationship with another person is a challenge. It's a challenge for everyone. It's the state that we're in the fallen world because of our fallen nature, because of our disconnect from God. It's an incredible challenge to trust another person and to open up completely to another person. And so, yeah, I think one of the key elements of that is you can no longer hide really who you are in a relationship. Maybe when you're growing up, especially if you become a teenager, you can kind of hide from your parents a bit, right? You can kind of, it's actually, even though your parents understand so much about you, they see you grow up, it's not that hard to hide things from your parents. Not everything, a lot less than you think you might. James is really laughing. But you can definitely hide some things from your parents, especially the things maybe deepest in your heart, the things you really are still afraid to let other people know about, the insecurities. And I know kind of in my relationship with my own father, there were definitely areas where I just couldn't talk to him about certain things. Right? I just couldn't really open up enough. To him. And I had a really good relationship with my father, and I liked to talk to him about everything. But just sometimes we got to a point where we just disagreed, and I had to stop. Right? It was just like, well, I don't want to fight about it, but I just think you're wrong, right? That kind of point. But in a relationship, those have to be worked. It's like you can't stop. You have to keep going. You have to keep evolving. You have to keep strengthening. So I think one of the key factors for success is obviously the attitude, right? And I think one of the things about the matching and blessing process is the kind of development of this attitude through the life of faith, to be humble, to be patient, to be honest, right? And I think another reason it's very hard is that it's so personal, right? The kind of, again, it's this point of honesty and being able to open up kind of the deepest parts of the heart is if there's struggle, when there's challenges, it's often because of things that are so personal between the two, right? It really is a unique type of relationship, the husband-wife relationship. And so it's very hard to get help if you're struggling. It's very hard to open up to other people. It's very hard to invite someone in to that intimacy, right? Even if you think about things like couples counseling, right? And you go and you talk to maybe a professional, that person, is still a stranger. There's still someone who maybe they help you connect closer to each other, but you don't really know if they're struggling in their life. They're obviously struggling too, right? They obviously have their own shortcomings and issues, right? And it's not that I'm saying counseling is bad. It can be very helpful. But it's just that it's such a personal relationship. It's so hard to get to fix real challenges, right? And we see that in the world, right? Divorce rates tend to be 50%, even when people are married and together, oftentimes there's a lot of fighting. In worst case scenarios, there's abuse. So, we know the world is kind of in an unstable state, especially around this point. But in all that context, the reason I'm mentioning all these things is it comes back to what I think is one of the most important questions for every single person in their life. And it's why the blessing? Why the blessing and not something else, right? Why is the blessing special? Why is it? Why not, why not a Mormon arranged marriage, right? Why not an Indian arrangement? Why not fall in love and have a very good family centered on Christian values, right? Because these things all happen. People do these things, they are successful. So what makes the blessing special? Is it the arranged marriage part? And I'd say, because that's kind of a quirk, it's something that's unique. It's the fact that we work with our parents, or in the past, we work directly with true parents to find us a life partner. Is that why the blessing is worth doing versus other forms of marriage and relationship? And I think that is only a part of it, right? I think there's a very easy risk that we narrow the value of the blessing to even something I was saying earlier about having the right attitude of humility, patience, honesty. But that's things you can do outside the blessing, right? You can develop those traits, you can develop those attitudes. And like I was saying, the Mormons have a pretty similar arranged marriage process. It's kind of arranged dating, if we're honest, but also, if we're honest, we're kind of also similar, going a similar route, right? With the kind of matching periods and the matching process we have now. And, there's other cultures that have done arranged marriages, that do arranged marriages, namely the Muslim and the Indian. And actually, probably still the majority of the world, if we count China and, most countries in the world. And also throughout history, the majority of marriages have been arranged marriages. Right? That was just kind of the more normal way to get married. So I don't think it's the arranged marriage part that makes the blessing unique. Right? And not even just the fact that it's, working with our parents and having kind of, I also don't think it's just the religious values part, because Christians do that, the Mormons do that. And so, I think that when we talk about the blessing, there has to be something that's completely different than what exists somewhere else in the world, something that's completely unique that makes the blessing worth doing from an individual's perspective, right? And I thought about this obviously the most before I got blessed, right? When I was in high school, I was always asking myself, why should I get blessed? Why is it important? Why does it matter, right? Can't I be happy without getting blessed? It's kind of the big question that I kept asking myself. And obviously, just to be very honest and clear, the answer to that question is yes, I can be happy without getting blessed. But I think the more important question, and the conclusion I came to is, but can I be as happy without getting blessed? And I'll try to explain that a little bit more in detail. So coming back to the point of the blessing is the establishment of the parental role, right? The point of the blessing is actually faith in the principle. And the core part of the principle in the blessing is this idea of restoration. And restoration, the way most people hear it, it sounds like a kind of, the biblical family story, this far off term that we use in the principle to describe history. But restoration is actually a daily process, the way the principle explains it. It actually explains it best when it explains what is resurrection. It's trying to explain the Bible quotes about resurrection and the way that people go from death to life, right? And so the blessing is about this process of restoration. And it's about this process of, no matter how kind of understanding and recognizing and accepting that we're away from them, that we're not perfect. So we have this off-kilter, fallen nature that we need to constantly be working and constantly fixing and constantly being evolving, developing. And, so for me, what's unique about this is from the very beginning and understanding through the principle that the difficult parts are the important parts. They're the parts where we're growing, the parts where we're learning. It's the parts where we're evolving to be closer to the ideal of children of God. It's really when we talk about God-centered families, we're talking about the understanding that God is our parent and that he loves us as his children and that we're not quite there yet, right? So it's a very personal belief that I have, that restoration is really what makes the blessing unique and powerful and important and separate from all other kinds of relationships and marriages, right? And so then in that context, the lineage part of the blessing, which for a lot of second gen, for a lot of us, is just kind of a vague term, vague meaning. But to me, becomes much more clear in the context of restoration because, again, talking about my own parents, right? I could see in their relationship things that I was very grateful to learn from that really kept our family a very happy family. That I'm always happy that and feel lucky to have been raised in my family. But also I saw stuff that was a source of instability, right? Source that caused kind of, I don't want to use the word trauma, but definitely some amount of, I also don't want to use the word drama, but it's kind of some amount of like disconnect from the idea is the best way to explain it, right? And there are things that in my own relationship, I'm actively trying not to repeat, right? To learn from and improve. And I think this is true for all of human history. I again, very personal belief that the world is getting better, that God is working in history, and that's why the whole world is improving. And we can't do the math or see the background, but genuinely every year, there's more plus than minus. Now that's a very personal belief, also impossible to prove, but I genuinely believe it when I look at the state of the world. And and I think that's because the restoration is happening regardless, because God is working behind the scenes. God is making that restoration happen through the evolution of the human spirit, through all the different religions, all the different successes in terms of our understanding of each other, even things like globalization, being able to speak to people across the world and being able to travel across the world, all those things help us to understand each other in a way that never existed in history. But in the blessing, again, what I think makes the blessing unique is the kind of active faith in restoration and that active movement towards God's idea and that understanding, that really clear understanding of the relationship of God as our parent. And in that context, and lineage is obviously becomes much more clear, is that if all those improvements that are made between the couple aren't passed on, then it becomes almost kind of like a dead end, right? An evolutionary dead end in terms of the evolution of the improvement of God's will. And I say that knowing that not every couple can have children, that sometimes it just, and not every couple then is able to get an offering child, because offering child is obviously our kind of direct solution to that problem. But I feel even then it's about, that's why there's one level up from just the family. That's why you have the family, but then the community, right? And so through tradition and through the community, you can strengthen other lineages, right? And that's why eventually you need a nation, you need a world, because it'll always stop somewhere, right? If the community falls apart, then even if the family's strong, eventually that lineage can be kind of weakened again, right? Because no family's really an island, no person's really an island. There's a constant battle with influence, and that restoration, even though I believe it's usually moving forward, it does move backwards. Right? It's not always forward. It's kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 5 steps forward, 2 steps back. You know, it's not a stable linear progression because, again, each person has responsibility. Each person has their own challenges. So all this is, you know, when we talk about God-centered families, this is what I believe is meant, right? It's this idea of the restoration on a couple level, then getting passed on through the lineage, and then also being influencing each other in a community level, so that that tradition is more likely to pass on, right? But I say all those things as kind of, in some ways, a hypothetical, or I don't want to say hypothetical because it's very real to our matching and blessing process, but it's much more the long-term benefit, right? The overall goal, the vision of moving towards the ideal, right? And that true parents are kind of laying out the steps and the guidance on how to make that possible, right? That's why we do the blessing. That's why we get matched. That's why we study the principle to understand what those steps require. That's why we try to support each other when we try to strengthen our ability as blessed couples to take care of each other, to understand each other. But there's another part of that, again, that I very much believe personally, and it goes back to the question of why the blessing? Can I be happy without it? And my conclusion was, you know, the principle talks about the balance of the purpose of the whole and the purpose of the individual, right? And I've always believed that if in the blessing, we are living the principle and following the principle and constantly never giving up on that process of restoration, then the people who benefit the most directly, immediately from that, is the 2 people in that process of restoration, right? In other words, I really believe that the short-term benefit or the individual benefit is also just as strong as that long-term move towards God's ideal. In other words, those 2 people are happy for doing that process. So again, if there were alternate universes, right, or parallel universes, and by the way, I don't believe in parallel universes or alternate universes, but if there was, and I could compare like all the different life paths I could take, right, I genuinely believe that I'm the happiest in the one where I get blessed and go through this process of restoration, right? That today in my daily life, despite my ups and downs and my struggles and all the different things that I might face, that this is, to use a terrible Gen Z cliche, my best life. Or maybe that's a millennial cliche. But like really my best and happiest life is the life I'm living because I'm following the blessing, right? And again, that's an act of faith. There's no way for me to prove that. There's no empirical evidence I can compare because there are no parallel universes. I can't pop into the other ones and see how I'm doing. But that's why I got blessed. That was my belief. And throughout my life and being blessed and building my family, I still genuinely believe it, right? That the blessing is the fastest path to happiness. Not because, you know, I'm married and I'm in love, and that's all part of it, but because in order to be happy, you have to go through this process of restoration. You have to get back to God. You have to find God. You have to understand God. And you have to do it as a couple, and you have to do it as a family, and you have to do it as part of the community. And it's the only way. You can always find some level of happiness, but unless it's constantly in that process of restoration, you'll hit a limit, you'll hit a ceiling, right? And then something will happen, or you'll stagnate. So my conclusion then, I wanted to share a dream I had. I think this kind of sums up I hope it sums up the point I'm trying to make. When I was trying to get matched in high school, I think I was about 17 or 18. I was filling out my form to submit, because at that time, True Father was still doing mail-in matchings. But also, I was living in a dormitory, and, I was very close with a lot of people. So some of the other brothers and sisters were also kind of filling out their form to submit it, right? And there was one sister that I was very, very close with. I was very good friends with. And so in this dream, I was the one who was like chosen to prepare the banquet hall. So I'd set up all the seats and stuff. And I got to see who was sitting where. And the whole idea of this banquet hall is they would announce all the matchings, and then everyone would sit together and be like a matching congratulatory banquet, right? Which meant I got to know who was matched before anyone else, right? In the dream. This never happened, just to be clear. So I knew who I was matching. And it was to this sister. But I was like sworn to secrecy. I wasn't allowed to tell anyone. But then I went into like a room while I was running back and forth, and everyone's there. Like, you gotta tell us who we're matched to. And this sister was like especially adamant. She's like, you gotta tell her, you gotta tell me who I'm matched to. I can't. She's like, oh, whatever. It's probably some loser anyway, right? Something like that. And I was like, in the dream, I was like so hurt. And I was thinking, God, she doesn't even know yet that we're already off on this like terrible foot, right? Like, what a disaster already. And then I woke up. And I can't remember if it's like as soon as I woke up or like right before I woke up. And it was kind of like this voice in the dream. It's like, this is not what the blessing is about. And then I woke up and I looked around, and I was in class. I slept a lot in class. So I woke up, and like instantly, like I'm talking 5 seconds, fell right back to sleep and into the next dream. And in this next dream, I was kind of like in an airport hall. And I was going to the lesson. I was going to observe the lesson, right? So it was like a big event. I was walking down. It was like a combination of an airport terminal and my own school hallway somehow, right? You know how dreams are. And I saw one of my friends from class. He was in the year above me, and he was all dressed up in a nice suit, and he looked really good. And I was like, are you getting blessed? This friend wasn't even a member, right? He was just a really nice guy. I kind of admired him. All dressed up in a suit in his dream. He's like, yes, I'm getting blessed. And in the dream, I was so happy. Like I was like ecstatic, and I gave him a big hug, and he was happy and smiling. And then that same voice was like, this is what the blessing is about. And then I woke up. And the message I took from that dream, at least for me, was very clear. I was kind of, obsessing over who I was going to get matched to, and worrying about that relationship, and like, kind of, general teenage angst about, these kind of things. But the message was, the real meaning of the blessing is human happiness. That people should be happy, and that's the goal of the blessing, is to really be happy for people, and that people find that, right? And of course, there's a whole challenge, but the end goal is human happiness. And the principles to me is so clear about it, right? Is that everyone can only be happy if they go through this process. Everyone's trying all these different ways to be happy, all these different, especially in the modern world, all these distractions to try to find happiness. But what true parents have taught so clearly, the key to happiness is the hard to fix our hearts. And the blessing is the template, the process that God actually always had for humans. Like that was what he was just waiting to give to Adam. And so it's the same process that's always existed. It's all the original plan that God had for human happiness. And we have to figure it out, and we have to learn, and we have to get there. And so again, coming back to the beginning, I'm so happy for Brendan and Valeria, so happy for Tara and Michael. And they're gonna have a long journey there. And we really have to support them and really be there for them, because it's all our journeys, right? This is the road that we're trying to take. And the road that we're not trying to take for ourselves, but the road we're trying to show everyone how to take, why they should get this. And the best way is to be successful ourselves, right? At that path to happiness. So those were my thoughts on the matching blessing, just sharing a bit, kind of my own reflections and kind of back and forths, my own reasons actually for really kind of when I came to this conclusion and this point in my life, really wanting to get blessed, but not under some delusional belief that blessing will solve my problems, but really wanting to get blessed, knowing it would be difficult, knowing that it would be a challenge, but also believing that that would be completely worth it, that it was a challenge that was completely worth it. And so hopefully, I hope that's something that can help other people on their journey to the matching blessing. Thanks for listening, and everyone today. And I will close with prayer. Sarang Manashin, our dear beloved and precious Heavenly Parents. As always, we're so grateful to be alive and be a part of this time in history, this place in the world, when we're here at the same time as our parents. We're here at a time when the whole world is shifting away from the dominion of Satan and of evil, and really moving towards your original. Of course, for us, existing kind of on a human time scale, it's often very hard for us to see, because we only see a short time between when we start understanding the way the world is, until eventually we ourselves have to move on to the spirit world. So it's very easy for us to focus on challenges in life, suffering that exists, sadness that we often encounter. But compared to where the world has been, especially right after the fall, especially throughout most of human history, there's so much to be grateful for. There's so many things that are moving in the right direction. There's so many changes in the way the world, the way the people of the world think and act. So I pray we can really always be grateful for what we have, who we are, and that we can always strive to help move this vision forward, move this path forward. I really believe that the ultimate goal of history is to end human suffering, to really find a way so that all people can live in genuine joy and happiness. And the truth is, despite all that your parents have done, despite all the advances that culture has made, still we're so far behind that dream, that idea. We're still so, it's still easy to be discouraged and to lose faith that such a world is possible. So I pray that as we kind of live in each moment and struggle day to day, we can be comforted by your love and also your wisdom. You can grant us the ability to see the path forward, the way forward, and also the wisdom to understand the role that we should play in the situation. So, on behalf of everyone here, my own name, Blessed Central Family, report these things and maybe together keep the lesson. So Dylan and Victor, what do we have for our closing song today?
By the Spirit of Life.
By the Spring of Life. That sounds like a good, optimistic, upbeat song to end the service on. Are we going to try to synchronize it again? So give us a minute, everyone. Hopefully our internet is syncing this up better. So. The lesson learned. He left the room, and I am not capable of it, so apologies for that. Yeah, why don't we stop the recording there? I think I don't have any main announcements.